Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's meeting of Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Mahalia France-Mear and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed on Leeds City Council's website so the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. I'd like to invite members and officers to introduce themselves and remember to turn off your mic because I never do.
Morning, everyone. Jonathan Foster, Head of Internal Audit, Corporate Governance and Insurance.
Councillor Jane Dowson, Chapel Allerton Ward Councillor.
Councillor Paul Ray from Huntsland and Riverside Ward.
Hi there, Hannah Bithell, Councillor for Kirkstall.
Good morning, Councillor Gore Almus from Beeston Holbeck Ward.
Morning, everybody. Rebecca Roberts, Legal Officer.
Ryan Glenn, Senior Audit Manager.
Brenda McLaughlin, Senior Audit Manager.
Emma Camillo Price, Intelligence and Policy Service.
Morning, Mary Hasnip, Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Morning, Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer, Financial Services.
Morning, Andrew Byram, Deputy Chief Digital Information Officer.
Morning, Chair, morning, members. Gareth Mills, I'm the Engagement Lead from Grant Thornton External Audit.
Good morning, Paminda Sethi, Grant Thornton External Audit.
Morning, Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Trish Smith, Pudsey Ward.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Conrad Hartbrook, Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Gott. I'm the Corporate Governance Manager.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Debbie Oldham and I'm the clerk today for the committee.
Right, good morning. Just having a look. So can we move on to item agenda 1?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there are no late items. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? And I take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, we have received apologies from Councillor Hesselwood and Victoria Bradshaw, Chief Officer for Financial Services. Thank you, Chair.
Jonathan?
Hi, just to cover matters arising. Oh, my apologies.
Sorry, that's my fault. I just want to check that the minutes are a correct record of the meeting that was held and chaired by Councillor Paul Ray on the 24th of July. Thank you.
Sorry, now on to matters arising. So following from July's committee meeting, a couple of items were raised. Firstly, by Councillor Bithell for the attendance of someone from IDS to attend the committee. And I'm pleased to say that Andrew is joining us today from IDS. And he has been forwarded the meeting minutes and will attend when he can on his calendar. So thank you. Councillor Flynn, who is no longer on the committee, but he did raise an item regarding the effective cost of living on adult social care and the social service users. He was forwarded a report that was presented to scrutiny the day after committee, and he has advised that he will take his comments to the chair of scrutiny. And again, just following from the March committee, which was a while ago, there was an item raised regarding privileged user access list to be presented to the chair and members, and I believe that was sent out on the 1st of September to you all. So yeah, that's all the matters arising. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on to item agenda 8.
Morning, Chair.
did you want me to kick off and introduce myself? My name is David Feeney. I'm the Chief Planning Officer for Leeds. I'm here today to speak to the annual assurance report on planning, decision making and enforcement arrangements. Just to set the scene, nothing to add to the report, Chair, but I would just like to set a little bit of context in terms of the report and some of the key headlines. First of all, just to confirm, this is the annual assurance report for planning, decision making and enforcement. The cycle of internal control framework has been used to give the assurances, the adequacy of the policies and practices for the reporting period April 22 to March 23. The report sets out the process and system changes which has been made in response to this to deal with, in particular, backlog issues relating to COVID, work level issues, budget and resourcing pressures as well. And finally, in terms of context, the decision-making framework of planning policies sets out the system and processes to ensure information is shared in a clear and consistent fashion. So in terms of the actual detail of the report, it's set out in a number of sections. The first section relates to define and document. And this part of the report sets the context really in terms of sort of the national legislation that planning in Leeds needs to adhere to. So the planning policy and procedures. There's a section relating to decision-making context for planning in Leeds, including the local plan, which is referred to. And then in addition, there are various planning procedures and guidance, including the council's delegation scheme and various protocols. And all of those elements come together to set the context for planning decision-making in Leeds. In terms of roles and responsibilities, the report talks about the delegated decision-making framework within the city. So reference is made to full council, the subdelegation scheme, and the work that's been associated with that. Reference is then made to plans panel decision making in terms of delegated decisions, member exceptions and referrals and requests to panel. And then reference is set out in relation to democratic oversight in terms of the roles of our panels and the executive member and other provisions set out in that part of the report. In terms of clearly communicating, the report then turns to describing some of the activity that we have in terms of informing the decision-making framework. So we have training sessions, and we have recently had training on SIL, viability and enforcement by way of examples. Guidance is issued on our SharePoint site to provide that material for the service and for members. And then through day-to-day working and leadership within the service, we have regular meetings with our teams and managers in terms of performance and decision-making in adhering to the council's requirements. In terms of effectively embedding, in terms of the particular challenges that we've had over the reporting period, these in particular relate to high volumes of applications. During the COVID period, the planning service remained operational, and we had high incidences of both major applications and also high level of householder applications for domestic extensions, etc. As with other parts of the council, we've had challenges with staff turnover and issues in relating to recruitment processes and pressures, particularly with regard to recruiting specialist staff and experienced planners, and it's a national issue at the moment. In terms of the work we've been doing, we had 2 independent service reviews carried out in 2020, and we've been continuing to work through the process of implementing those recommendations. This part of the report talks about a number of case studies relating to officer declaration of interest, the householder protocol, enforcement key cases, review of customer communications, as well as engagement with elected members. There's also a section relating to complaints, learning lessons from the LGO, performance on appeals, and describing the government's sort of performance regime for local planning authorities in relation to special measures. In terms of meaningfully monitoring what we're doing, there's a number of embedded requirements of the system, particularly with regard to statutory reporting and publishing performance information. We also undertake benchmarking with core cities and through practitioner groups as well. We provide quarterly returns on monitoring for the government and performance on appeals, and also within the service on a day-to-day and on a regular basis. We look at officer caseloads, customer complaints and the nature of those complaints, ensure that we monitor our data in terms of the quarterly time periods that are set for that, as well as regular engagement with core cities and practitioners groups. I think at the moment it's particularly important, given the ongoing planning reforms being promoted by government, to have those levels of engagement with those various bodies. In terms of refining and review, there are a number of system and process changes that we've implemented, and these relate to some of the challenges in terms of the overall budget position, the implementation of the service reviews. And whilst we have experienced in the last 6 months or so a reduction in the number of applications coming into the service, I think it's fair to say the complexity of planning is ever increasing, and there are demands associated with the planning reforms where we're having to adjust what we do and how we do it. In terms of some of those measures, the report summarises a number of them, including the householder applications, the checker for the community infrastructure levy, and it's positive that the numbers of complaints have gone down. We continue to refresh and update our local enforcement plan, and we're also working closely with IDS colleagues to achieve a number of service improvements consistent with the government's commitment to the digitisation of planning services. The main thrust of the government reforms is through the Levelling Up bill, and whilst there's been a number of consultations with local planning authorities, we're still to see the actual detail of what that means in practice. The report also makes reference to a number of review documents, including the delegation scheme, the plans panel terms of reference, and also the local plan. So in conclusion, Chair, the report sets out a number of recommendations in relation to the statement of assurance. This relates to 4 areas. Define and document. We're continuing to review our documents on an ongoing basis. This is important given the dynamic nature of planning and also the nature of the ongoing planning reforms. In terms of clearly communicating, we're now establishing a process of having caseworker meetings on the Teams that can be recorded, so that those key messages and lessons learned and innovations can be shared with the team and also can be reviewed through the recording. In terms of performance issues, in terms of monitoring, we're working with IDS on performance dashboard innovations to help us monitor our data more effectively. And then in terms of review and refine, we're looking at further work in relation to our validation checklist and criteria this autumn. So it's an ongoing process, Chair. So I hope that's useful by way of an overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, David. Are there any questions from the members? Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that, David. Just in relation to enforcement and just your feelings on insurance, I think it's probably something I would not be out and saying for other elected members that we do generally have concerns over enforcement sufficiency and actual consistency. And without going into individual cases, I had a particular case, just in summary, where it went on for 4 years to the point that the developer went bust, and now the council's having to pick up the bill because there seems to be a resistance to enforce, and basically in a, how shall we say, to try and save the council money, it actually ends up costing the council money because there's a resistance to actually go down the formal legal route and to give developers never-ending chances. Are you assured that our actual enforcement is acting as a deterrent in the way it should be working, or because of financial constraints, are you able not to do what you would prefer to do, which is to be a much more proactive and aggressive enforcement setup?
Thank you, Councillor Ray, for your question. It is a challenge enforcement, isn't it? It's a discretionary service that we provide, but it's something that we give a high priority and importance to. As you're aware, we have the local enforcement plan, which sets out the context for how we investigate cases which are brought to our attention. I think as part of that, there's a range of measures that we look at, and we try to take proportionate action in relation to the merits of individual cases. In not all instances do we need to go down a formal route. Persuasion, dialogue, engagement with the offender is often sufficient to turn things around and to get those improvements. I accept, though, that in a number of cases there is resistance to particular measures that we want to see introduced, and I would always ask for more resources in terms of enforcement. We have put in place additional capacity where we've had those resources made available to us. It is a challenge when particular developers or householders or whoever it might be dig their heels in, and we need to, look at those cases on their merits and the merit of taking them all the way through the process. But equally, given the council's position, we do have to have one regard to costs associated with that process, and obviously my finance colleagues will need to be made aware of those issues where there are particular cases. We've had a recent case which has been prevailing where those costs are substantial, so there are risks and balances associated with it, but I wouldn't say that costs is the justification for not taking action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, David. So why do some of these cases, and again, I'm trying to understand from a procedural point, what is the methodology that your enforcement officers are going through where they will literally give a developer a chance after chance after chance after chance after chance and after chance before it gets to a point where someone goes, well, actually, this person's not playing ball, and therefore we need to do something. And again, I'll come to the example, and I'm happy to send you over the case notes as an example after the meeting, where after 4 years of your planning officers and legal going, give them a chance, give them a chance, give them a chance, the developer went bust, and now Highways Leeds is going to have to pick up the bill for actually finishing a road off, which is going to cost the council more. So are you assured, bearing in mind we're talking here about the procedures, that your officers have the robust decision-making matrix, which is transparent and understandable, and most importantly, consistent, not subject to the whims of what an officer may or may not wish to do, but a consistent methodology which is transparent and understandable, which is delivering the results that the planning authority should be delivering, rather than just basically relying on, well, we think they might do this or not. Do you have confidence that you have that? And would you be able to present information either as a briefing note or as a supplementary item to this committee at a later date to give assurance that on something which is a matter of absolute key priority to elected members, which I think it's fair to say most elected members don't have confidence in general, that there is actually assurance there is consistency in that process?
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Well, I can give you assurance. I mean, the approach and methodology is set out as part of our local enforcement plan, which is on the council's website, and that information has been shared with members. We've also had briefing sessions and training sessions with members on enforcement as well, to explain what powers we have and the processes that we're following. I'm happy to look at the case that you're referring to and review the steps that have been taken if that would be helpful, but I can give you the assurance that at every point my enforcement colleagues, in discussion with legal colleagues and other colleagues no doubt across the authority, will have looked at all of the options available to us.
And again, David, I thank you for that, and again, I was just giving that example, but I think you speak to any elected member and they probably don't have that assurance. I don't want to put words in the elected members' colleagues, but I'm seeing a lot of nodding, that there is not that assurance there. And a briefing is one thing, understanding and appreciating and understanding the trigger points is another. And from a perspective of a structure that is, we can put lots of documents on things and we can do X, Y, and Z, but if there is inconsistency in how things are being doing, and things were just to, and I hate to use the word, common sense, because common sense is a dangerous phrase at the best of times, but when something, and there's multiple cases I'm sure we all have in our own wards, where you can just see that actually no action is being taken because it's constantly how long is a piece of string. So I think what we're asking for, we know you'll have a structure in place. What we're giving you a challenge is we don't feel that structure is actually good enough, and that there's a conversation to be had about the consistency of how your enforcement practices are actually being applied. And if there are blockers outside of the service, so that's legal advice or that's other departments, then that says there's an issue within the process over the piece that needs to be looked at. So it might not necessarily be your department that's the issue, or your directorate. It could be that legal is resistant, but then there's a conversation to have with legal. It could be that there are partner agencies such as Highways Leeds or etc. that are maybe resistant to certain action being taken. And I think for our assurance, we want to understand where those blockages are in. And it comes to a general point with this report. There's lots of information here. It doesn't tell me where the problems are. And actually, we had a similar conversation at corporate governance at WICA only last week. Lovely oversight. Tell us where the problems are so that we can have those conversations and we can have assurance that you're trying to overcome those problems. Just don't tell us what's happening. Tell us why it's happening. Because actually, this doesn't really tell me why things are happening in this report. It just says they're happening. That's not useful from a perspective of actually being able to provide the critical challenge that we're here to provide. But whether it's in this body, looking at it on a corporate level, or whether it's probably in the scrutinies, looking at it on a more procedural level, give us more detail. That's not enough detail for me to have proper assurance that things are working properly within your directorate.
Just on the point, Councillor Ray and Chair, about consistency, I think what I'd like to understand are some examples. You know, if outside of this meeting, you're able to point me in the direction of where you feel that there's an inconsistency of approach, then, you know, I would look at those and we would review what we've done and why in those instances. I think speaking generally, I'm not suggesting there aren't issues, but I think you need to understand the particular cases to take that away. That's the first thing. I think in terms of the challenges we have, the fundamental challenges we have is the very high caseload that planning enforcement officers have. At any one time in Leeds, there's something like 1,000 cases which are ongoing, and they range from, you know, modest breaches to substantial, significant matters which have to be considered. And across the spectrum of that activity, you know, we have a team of people who are dependent on other services across the council, as well as our own capacity within my service. It is a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge in resourcing terms. I think there are issues about perception in terms of how far people think planning enforcement can actually go and what measures are seen as appropriate at any particular time. We can't take everybody to court the minute there's a modest breach in a planning condition. It's not practical, it's not realistic, and it's not proportionate. So what we need to be able to do is to differentiate in terms of the particular cases that we're dealing with, and the local enforcement plan that I've referred to already seeks to set that out in terms of the types of action that we can take. But in terms of issues relating to consistency or a concern that there's been an inconsistency, then I'm happy to take that away, Chair. If some further information can be provided, I'd be happy to review those cases. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dowson.
Yeah, I don't want to labour the point, but there does seem a reluctance to actually take things to the next step. And with larger developments and developers, there's the word of mouth that if the council start not doing something, word will get out. And that's just a theory. It's not an accusation against any particular developer, because like Councillor Ray, I've got cases that have gone on for years and years and years and years with no action being taken. So it's this custom and practice thing about allowing cases to go on and on and on with no resolution. But that's just a comment. Please don't come back, because you're obviously going to do some work on this and come back to us. But I think we need to do work on quicker decision making and not allowing cases to roll on and on. Either we drop it and we drop it, or we actually take it to its next step, because we begin to look stupid and foolish as elected members when our residents complain time after time about something that is justifiably as a complaint, and the council appear to be impotent at doing anything about it.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. David, yes, I don't want to labour the point either, but I can give a couple of examples in my own ward where if action had been taken at the point when something was raised, we wouldn't have even got to the stage where enforcement was needed. I've got two very good examples where officers had an opportunity, well, several opportunities to actually prevent something from happening, which is now causing a lot of enforcement issues. So I do think that there is a lack of action at the right time, and the consistency in approach isn't there. Thank you.
David, would you like to come in? And then we're going to draw a line underneath this item.
That's fine, Chair. Thank you. I say if members can share those instances with me, then I will look at them. And it's difficult to speak hypothetically without actually seeing the detail of what they are and what the prevailing circumstances are. But it does come back to taking proportionate action at the right time within the capacity and the resources that we have. But I'll certainly look at the cases that members have referred to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I know I said it was the last one, but I'm going to get Councillor Brooks, and then that will be the last one. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realise we were getting close to the end. I agree with what everybody's raised. A slight different topic for me is the opaque way that planning comments are being handled now, whether there's any kind of comments on that and the timescales for what might be happening in terms of a review of that policy.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor, you're referring to the third party comments issue, aren't you? I mean, this hasn't been picked up in the reporting period of this report, Chair. So is it something you want me to comment on, because it's not in this reporting period? It is a matter that is a trial at the moment, and there is a scrutiny process, and we'll be taking a report to scrutiny early in the new year. So I don't want to preempt that, Chair, by commenting in detail at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think what we're going to do is bring that as a separate item in the future. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item agenda 9, annual assurance report on decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the decision-making framework report. So the decision-making framework runs throughout the council's arrangements to give the effect and principle and commitments of the local code of governance. It is relevant to openness, stakeholder engagement, to proportionate, sustainable and realistic decision-making and to the capacity. This report provides the committee with assurances that the council has a well-established decision-making framework, and where a decision has been taken under special urgency or general exception rules, there is sufficient reason and authorisation for this action. The appendix to the report follows the cycle of internal control, the first stage of the cycle being define and document, where members will note that there are several rules, protocols and responsibilities relating to decision-making. There have been no significant changes this year following the arrangements in place from the previous year. The next stage of the cycle looks at clearly communicate, relating to how well the arrangements have been communicated and shared with those with decision-making responsibilities, looking at the leadership, advice, guidance and training. Just to note that we are looking to improve this offer in the coming year through the evaluation of the survey of internal control. The third stage of the cycle is effectively embed, which demonstrates the use of decision-making framework and details how many decisions and which category they have been taken in. The following stage is meaningfully monitor, which shows how those with specialist oversight and controls are evaluating whether the system is working. There is a number of established performance indicators following a dip in performance during the pandemic. We are noting that those KPIs are now recovering and are now close towards the target. For example, the KPI that all key decisions are published on the list of forthcoming decisions. The key performance indicator is 95%, and in 22-23 we achieved 94%, so we're quite close. The final stage of the cycle is review and refine. We have continued to conduct a sample testing of decisions taken by officers, making sure that all the details that we expect to be included in the report are present. We will also review the feedback that has been received from senior officers who have completed the survey of internal control and continue to benchmark our decision-making arrangements against laws with other local authorities. And so just to note that I am pleased to present this on behalf of the Principal Corporate Governance Manager, and some questions may need to be taken away. So, so if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Bithell?
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple, if that's okay. On page 69, it talks at the bottom. The questions are basically around member officer relations. And I just wonder how much our staff really understand what members' role is, and how embedded that is in the training that we corporately offer to our staff, and how much, I guess, we're just seen as an annoyance. But yeah, I just wondered whether that was a thing. And the next question also links to training. The decision-making toolkit that's written on here, I wonder if that's included in our training as members. I feel like I now am really clear on that decision-making toolkit, but I'm 5 or so years into being a councillor. I don't know that I really understood the different styles of decision we make when I first was elected. Of course, there may have been a training. I was a little bit deer in headlights. And then my final question is, it talks about there being less business on the executive board. And I just wondered why there's less on the executive board at the moment. It states it like a sort of, that it's an obvious thing that would happen, and it's not obvious to me. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Regarding the member and officer relationship and the decision-making toolkit, I am in the process of reviewing what training package we are offering. So I will take your comments on board and emphasise those points within that training. Less business on executive board, I'm not entirely sure about that, so I can take that away, get an answer for you, and report back if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Ray?
I think it's just true. I think, as Councillor Biffle said, I also think it would be very helpful if elected members understood what delegate decision making was, and actually why we do that vote at full council, and actually what it means in practice, and actually where our role as oversight and decision maker, because I think sometimes there are perhaps confusions within the processes as to who's actually responsible for making a decision and who's just responsible for oversight of that decision making process. Because I feel so if that can be really embedded, because I think we've raised this in previous years at this scrutiny, we need to be doing more to embed in all decision makers, including elected ones, actually where the decision making powers lie, because I think that sometimes gets to the heart of some of the challenges between officers and elected members, and maybe not necessarily understanding that actually a decision is delegated, and sometimes officers not understanding that elected members sometimes have a duty of scrutiny over how decisions are made. So anything that can refine that and actually embed that properly, I think might save a lot of aggravation sometimes between officers and elected members in both directions.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'll take that on board, and obviously we'll bob that in the training to emphasise those points. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. Councillor Bithell?
I'm not 100% sure how to formulate it into a question, so it might just come as a comment, because I'm not really sure what the question I'm asking is. But I was really surprised that in the comparison of the volume of significant operational decisions that have been published, that adults and health has more in this year than during COVID, which I would have expected to have been in that particular directorate a relatively high number given all the care home related stuff. So it might not be for this, but I wonder if there's some scrutiny that can go on around that.
Yes, thank you. I did note that there was quite an increase in the adult social care significant operational decisions. I can go away and give you a proper breakdown as to what those decisions were. I've noted that there've been an increase in the high value care packages that we offer, and that was like 70 of those decisions. So I can give you a proper breakdown of what those numbers entail out of this meeting, if you like.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. I guess I was expecting it to look more like the public health graph. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions regarding that? Okay, thank you. Just going back to item agenda 9, on the annual assurance report on plan and regulation. I just wanted to make sure that members are okay with the recommendations set out in the report. So no, I missed it on the end. Yeah, we're happy with that. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to item agenda 10, the internal audit and update report. So are we okay with the recommendations? But brilliant. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 10. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. So yes, this is our update report on the work undertaken between April and the end of August this year. So there is some crossover there in the content between information that I will have presented in the annual report at the end of July. And obviously the period has continued somewhat there. You'll recall in July that I mentioned that the team had been undergoing a restructure. So again, the period that we cover here covers part of that. And I think the fact that we have got up to 27 reports issued in the period is a testament to how well, again, the team have adjusted over the course of that period. So the table you will see in Appendix A goes through the list of reports that we've issued during that period. Notable on there that there are some where we've given a limited assurance opinion. And again, I think it is worthwhile noting that does reinforce the success in many respects of our audit planning process because we deliberately and intentionally direct our focus towards the areas where we feel there will be the opportunities to add value there. There's been positive responses from management across those areas, again, in terms of agreeing the recommendations. Within those, and as with all limited assurance reports, they are subject to a follow-up. So not only do the recommendations go on to the trackers, but we will directly be following up in those areas as well to check back on progress. Moving on to recommendation tracking itself, obviously a huge area of focus for the committee. So we have now tried to present the information a little bit differently and a little bit more intuitively in terms of the outstanding recommendations. So there's an increased level of openness there, which I hope helps yourselves in understanding the spread of recommendations there. So going on to, is it page 88 there? There's a detailed table across directorates around the detail of the open recommendations. Now, certainly, just over half of those I feel are either implemented, or either not due yet, or are only a small amount of time overdue. But it does leave a volume of recommendations as well in that 6 months onwards period, which obviously do require attention. And we have been looking specifically into those during the period. So I don't want to go into specific details on recommendations here, but there are circumstances around those which I think our tracking process at the moment doesn't quite capture in terms of understanding the extenuating circumstances there. What I can reassure members is that it isn't the case that the recommendations have been dismissed or ignored, but there are factors around the original target date or the progress that's been made to date, which mean that we can't quite sign those off, or they can't quite be signed off as complete yet. That said, it is a moving picture all the time, and just as recently as last week, you will see the figures for communities, environment and housing, where there are 8 recommendations overdue the 6 months. That immediately comes down by 5 following a check-in with the auditing department, who hadn't updated the tracker, but they have given reassurance to us there that those recommendations have been implemented. And in fact, that is an area that is subject to a follow-up audit as well. So we'll be testing the progress ourselves there. And I'd just like to draw members' attention to one error in the figures there on the top line, children and families, where it states there are 8 recommendations in the 6 to 12 months period. That should actually be a 0 there. So as errors go, it's a good news one, and apologies for that, but it's actually 0 in that area. So Recommendation tracking certainly is something that we continue to work on embedding. And like I say, the information that's captured on the trackers will continue to be helpful to us in capturing some of those circumstances where there are challenges. And it is also bolstered by our follow-up audit process for the particularly risky areas where there are the limited opinions as well. So that action to improve the recommendation tracking is also reflected in our quality assurance improvement programme, which is covered in Appendix B. You'll see that our feedback from the customer satisfaction questionnaires has been good during the period. And again, very proud of the way that the team have performed and the team have adjusted during that time frame. The final new piece of information that we presented here is the last table on page 102 around plan completion. And I know this is an area that members had pushed us on for transparent information in past meetings as well. So this goes through the volume of planned assignments across each assurance area, the amount that was completed, the amount in progress, and the amount that we've got yet to start. I would like to again reiterate in the context of that information that the audit year does roll a little bit towards the completion of that annual opinion. So much of the time around this update has been spent completing the work from the previous year's plan. That said, we have convened as a team and we're confident that our plan for completing the audits that are outstanding this year is robust and that we have got the resource available to do that. So hopefully that information will be valuable again over the course of time as we come back to the committee with future updates to show again the amount that have been completed and where we are as we prioritise which jobs need to be done and when. So that's the completion of my presentation on that. And again, we'll do the best that I can to answer any questions that members have.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much, Chair. Further to reading this report, I was going through on Appendix 1.4.4, looking at the table on page 81 in relation to SEN out of area placements follow-up. And I just wanted to ask, given the fact that already by month 4, we are projecting an overspend that is more than double than what was budgeted for at more than £14.6 million times 2. Do you mind me asking, can we have more information on why it's then acceptable for the controlled environment assurance and also the minor organisational impact, given that already by month 4, which was July, we're with significant overspend and it could go even more than that going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Obviously, the point that you make there is significant in terms of the budget and the overall position there. But I think it's important to realise that the audits that we will undertake in this area, particularly with this one where it has been a follow-up with relation to weaknesses that had previously been identified, will not simply be kind of influenced by the budget position, but by the control environment within that. So the particular area of focus here for those out of area placements had been around the payment or checking and authorisation process. So whilst I appreciate your point that the budget overspend will always have an impact, the opinion that we've given here is particularly around those weaknesses that that we'd identified in the previous reviews that we'd done. So we have been able to see that there are significantly improved processes in place. The reason it's acceptable really is because they haven't fully had the time to embed yet, but it's around the area of focus really. So yes, I mean, nobody can get away from the fact of how important the council's budget position is, but the specific focus of this review was around an area of weakness that we'd identified in the past, and that is what that opinion relates to.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Firth? No. Okay, Councillor Bithell.
Thanks, Chair. On page 88 with the table, I wonder if it would be possible to have a total column in between the recommendations where it's been missed and total open recommendations, just so we can see how many out of date. I mean, I just did the math, but it would be nice if I didn't have to. In terms of the specifics, so adults and health was one of the limited and moderate with debt recovery. And then there's a bunch of out of date recommendations there. And I just wanted to check, are those out of date recommendations relating to a moderate risk? I don't know whether that's information that can be given here at this point, but.
Okay, so first of all, on the presentation of the information, very happy to take on that point. This is the first stab at trying to present the recommendation in that more intuitive way. So we'll take that on board and come back with that one. The adults and health, I would have to check on those. The information that I'd collated together, I'd specifically focused on the ones that are more significantly out of date in the time period. I believe that relates to another area, but I'd have to come back to you on the specific area that one relates to. The reason I say that is because if it related to the area that we have followed up here, it kind of gets superseded in the tracking process by that. So those recommendations will have been agreed very recently in that period, and will be more in the not due yet area.
Thank you. I also wonder, with there being so many recommendations that are out of date, or where the target dates be missed within schools, whether actually our targeting and our recommendations are fit for purpose. We know the situation schools are in. And actually, I wonder whether there is some work to be done around kind of pulling back and seeing, actually, is there any, maybe not easier, but a more efficient way that we can get the same outcome with recommendations that are effective. The EHC plans, I thought it was really good, the amendments that have been made to the way that they're being dealt with. And I just wondered whether I could request that it be brought back, because it's, you guys are sitting on the board that's getting the reports, but it would be helpful to us because they're such an incredibly important part of what we deliver, to hear those here again. And then finally, just on the, and it was mentioned again in your presentation, the fact that at the beginning of the year, we're catching up last year's. Are we getting later catching up last year's each year? Or is it a case that we're just always a bit behind and we could have a short term, I mean, I imagine there aren't agency auditors, but something similar in terms of just give it a boost so we can get back on track to then stay on track in years going forward. Thank you.
So I'll take those in turn. So first of all, on the schools one, where agreed is that higher volume of those recommendations that have been outstanding for a long period. Those actually only relate to two specific audits, where I think the difficulty with schools sometimes that differs, I think, from the rest of the tracker is that whilst the rest of the trackers can be opened up to officers across the authority for updating, we actually have to check and update the schools ones ourselves because of access restrictions there. So I think it's been difficult, particularly again over this period, for us to get the most up-to-date progress updates, notwithstanding the fact that there had been recorded as progress being made previously. But the reassuring thing for you there is that those two audits are both on our follow-up schedule. I think one is due to start imminently, actually. So they will come through, or the updates on progress, and those will come through for yourselves in the update report process anyway. But on the, I guess, how fit for purpose our target date setting process is, it's something that we continually reflect on, and this again shines a light on areas where, with the best will in the world, actions are agreed at a point in time, and then there are factors which affect the ability to implement that. We always do need to reflect on that, but we always try to agree those targets with the buy-in from management, notwithstanding the fact that things can change thereafter. The positive here is that this recommendation tracking information gives us such intelligence over that, which is so much better than what we'd had in the past. So we're able to review and improve that area consistently. The point you raise around the education, health and care plans, this is something that I think is subject to a scrutiny inquiry at the moment. So I think it's important that we let that inquiry run its course, but certainly note your comments there without doubt. And can you just remind me on the final question there?
Yeah, are we getting later each year with the?
So yeah, understood. Actually, on the contrary there, we're trying to bring it back. I think at the start of the COVID pandemic, we pushed back our annual reporting deadlines to more like the November period. Traditionally, the annual report has always gone in July, so we've tried to bring that back. And that kind of rolling delivery of the plan, if you like, is not unusual, not uncommon. I mean, we discuss plan completion, not just in this authority, but we discuss it with our partnering authorities on a regular basis to understand the arrangements that they have in place for delivering the plan. And I think the position that we're in with that kind of overlap there between the year ends is quite common for an audit function. In terms of the ability to bring in agency auditors, I mean, we do have the support where we need to, if it was to be a situation where we'd identified that our resource was diminished to the point where we needed to look at that as an emergency option, because this is a statutory service, obviously. But at the moment, as I say, we've been through what I would describe as a rigorous planning process with our two senior audit managers and our head of finance internal audit. And I am confident with the resource that we have to deliver the plan over the course of the year. And these update reports will continue to give you the opportunity to review our progress and to challenge that as you will.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jonathan. Just a question in relation to the table in Appendix A, where it's of recommendations overdue, and the table in Appendix B about the assurance block. Now, IT and information governance on the insurance blocks, there's 3 reports overdue, etc. But thinking about all the other assurance block areas, how many of those, in terms of their recommendations that appear in Appendix A, are highly dependent on work happening from our IT colleagues as part of the core business transformation? So though there may only be very specific recommendations to ICT and information governance, how much of all the other work that's overdue, as it were, in terms of implementing those recommendations in the other directorates, is actually highly reliant on our colleagues in ICT and information governance doing their job, and therefore actual issues within that area, bearing in mind some of your assurance block hasn't started yet, work within ICT and information governance, is delaying that core business transformation and the implementation of the insurance recommendations?
Okay, thanks for the question there. I can't quote a specific figure to you there, but certainly core business transformation, obviously it's a huge programme for the council at the moment. And you're right that certainly if you look at the finance and key financial systems area where there are overdue recommendations, some of those are reliant on the implementation of the new financial system to fully address the issue. That said, in those circumstances, again, through the progress updates that we give, and this information doesn't quite come through strongly enough, there are kind of interim steps and interim measures that are taken to address the control. In terms of core business transformation and the implementation of that, I'd be loath to say that it is purely kind of the responsibility of our colleagues in IT for the implement. That's very much a shared responsibility with significant oversight all over the authority in what we do in there. But it's a valid point that certainly there is a proportion of those recommendations that will be relying particularly on core business transformation to fully close off the issue. And it's something that I can go and look at in terms of across the piece, in terms of systems-based reliance and the amount that are reliant on that. And it may be that we look at some point at themes, if you like, around why recommendations are overdue. And it's kind of an ongoing step change for us. But I think that's a valid point around drawing that thematic information around why things are overdue.
Yeah, I think that'd be very useful, because obviously it'll then help us have assurance that actually, is it something within that particular directorate? Is it something that's actually, as you say, systematic across the piece? Because then that all and hopefully maybe inform conversations that happen in other boards and committees across the council in terms of actually senior political decision making, senior corporate decision making, that act if there are roadblocks being caused in some of these quite important recommendations being implemented, does there need to be a shift of focus within those other areas? So I think if we can get that thematic information so that we have that better understanding of where the issues may lie corporately and within the decision making process, I think that'll be quite useful for other parts of the council to inform their conversations in decision making.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to say another thank you to the internal audit team for acting on the builds that the committee's brought to them around action tracking, around audit plan delivery, etc. I think sometimes we've got to be careful what we wish for, because more information provides more questions, but that's healthy, that's good. So I'd wrote down, I think I haven't got any questions. I want it to be noted that I'm really pleased that the questions that the committee is raising now is on the back of the more detailed information that the internal audit function's providing. And I want to say thank you and well done.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions or comments on that? No. So are we happy to approve the annual governance statement, including the action plan? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And then can we go to item 12, please, the work programme? Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. Sorry.
So we're on this one. We're on item 10, so we're doing recommendations for 10.
Yeah. So can we go to internal?
No, we've just done.
All right. Yeah. So can we do the recommendations, please, for number 10? Are we happy to approve them? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Right. Can we go on to the annual governance statement, please? Thank you. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. And so following the interim annual governance statement that was presented at the July meeting, this is the final annual governance statement being brought to committee following a period of public deposit. So just to confirm that whilst it was on public deposit, there was no questions or comments raised by the public during that period. So the annual governance statement has been updated to address the progress of those actions that were nearing their original deadlines and also include the action plan for 23-24, which was endorsed by the corporate leadership team. So the committee are asked to approve the final annual governance statement, which will be published with the accounts in due course. So as I previously stated, I'm pleased to present this on behalf of the principal governance manager. I will try and address any questions, but there may be some that I may need to take away. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Bithell?
Chatty today, aren't I? Apologies for that. On page 122, there's a diagram, and one of the bullet points, it says best in breed in quote marks, which I'm not 100% sure what it means, which therefore means it's probably not got too much value in being a thing. I guess it's something related to being great, but yeah, I'm not sure of the wording of that is where to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I do agree. I'll have a look at that and reword it. Thank you. Fabulous.
Hello, Gareth.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was just to make the point that this document is essentially still a live document until such time as the 22-23 accounts are signed off. So, on the planned timescale, that's likely to be, well, it will be in the new year, Chair. So obviously, I know this is for approval today, but in essence, given that it sits alongside the accounts for the period it relates to, there could be the potential for this document to be updated for any material changes between now and, say, March, Easter time next year, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments on that? Nope. Okay. Are we happy to approve it with amendments going forward? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item 12, the work plan.
Thank you. So this is the item regarding the work plan for the committee going forward for the rest of the year. Just to note a couple of amendments. So we've have to shimmy around the agenda slightly to accommodate Grant Thornton's reports later in the year. The annual assurance report for procurement was due at this committee, but that's been moved forward to November. And the counter fraud and corruption update report will be moved from November to February. So just to note those amendments. And then that's it. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions regarding that? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. You very kindly mentioned about further to Councillor Hart-Brooks' point about planning comments and also generally the governance of and transparency of it. Can I just ask in what sort of format and when we expect that to be coming to the board? Thank you.
Jonathan.
Can you just qualify that question, Councillor Firth?
The Chair earlier said that we'd be looking at it as a separate item at another meeting.
Oh, to address the specific queries that you'd raised during the planning report. Okay.
Yes.
David's obviously vacated now, but it'll be for David to take away. Obviously, it will come up in matters arising at the next meeting around any further assurances. So whether that actually forms another report, I mean, planning has tended to be on cycle annually with the committee, or often in these circumstances, Councillor Firth, where a report generates a series of questions or recurring issues in that update will then come to members outside of the meeting for the review. So I'll catch up with David, the Chief Planning Officer, around that to determine how we take that on and whether it is a case of needing to timetable a follow-up report to the whole committee, or whether obviously some of the issues that I think David will be picking up are reliant on members as well, giving some further details around specific cases for him to look into.
Councillor Ray.
Yeah, just a broad comment on the just the forward work programme and the agendas. Some of these are obviously perennial, they have to come back every year, finance, etc. But bearing in mind, obviously, the scope and the complexity of the council and the limited time we have in these meetings, some of these probably don't shift very much year on year. And so I'm wondering is that if there's actually a need for them to come back absolutely every single year, and actually if we need to have a bit more dynamism in terms of the reports we're looking at, so that we can focus on other areas. So, for example, David's planning one, and I know I gave David a bit of a bit of stick on the enforcement. Actually, that's pretty much almost the identical report we have every single year, because so unless there's a seismic change within planning regulations, at which point we probably want it to come back and understand the insurance of how that's been implemented, these agendas are looking very static year on year. And actually, are we giving the depth to the key focus areas that the committee wants to focus on? Because ultimately, these agendas should be committee led, not necessarily what would look good as a regular report back. And I'm wondering if we've looked at some of those recommendations from peer review in terms of colleagues in other audit authorities around actually having a more focused agenda specifically on areas of key concern we have, rather than just, we're going to give you a report because we've done it every single year.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ray. I have discussed this with the Principal Governance Manager, and we are looking at that for the next year, what we can shimmy around and be more useful to you as members. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Oh, thank you. Third time lucky. I just wondered, with the review on the SEN currently taking place, will a report come back here for us to audit that? I know it will go to children's and families, but will we get a chance to look at that here as well, please? I think there'll be some process changes perhaps, so it might be worth.
We would always tend to allow the existing inquiry to kind of run its course with something like that. But we keep an eye on what the developments are. And then, as I say, as we formulate the work programme, that's an opportunity for us then as a committee really to take a judgment call on the area where the committee may want to look at the arrangements. But I think the emphasis at the moment needs to be on allowing the inquiry to and the kind of report to run its course in the area that it is, so as to avoid any duplication of effort, if you like.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting we take it now. I was just saying, you know, will it come back eventually?
And again, I think we can look at that in the context of the entire work programme at that point in time. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? No. Okay, are we happy to consider the work plan and the amendments? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's the end of the meeting. The next meeting is on Monday at 10:30 on the 27th of November. Thank you very much. Thank you.